So this topic's a little more sciencey than some of the topics we've had, but I'm really excited about it because it directly relates to and correlates to why BFR is so effective in giving us results. And so I wanted to dive into the science a little bit, and then we're going to do our own kind of experiment, or it's kind of like a preliminary experiment on any of our members who want to get involved in this, because there's, not surprisingly, not a lot of research on women, and especially women kind of post menopause plus, specifically with BFR. So I'm trying to continue to show, I mean, we all kind of know it in this group probably because we've felt some of this ourselves with the response to BFR. That's why all of so many people are loving this program, but it's nice to see actual data to show how it's impacting our bodies. So the main things I want to talk about today is blood lactate, what that means, how that's measured, and what that means in terms of how that's impacting our body and our results. And then also human growth hormone. And we've talked about that before, but what does that really mean? What is that doing for us? How do we know if we're getting that in our workouts or not? So high lactate is known, blood lactate, we have blood lactate in our body all the time. Normally it should be relatively low in just when we're, at rest or just doing daily life activities, it's relatively low because oxygen kind of combats lactic acid. So even when we're doing cardio, if we're doing low level kind of zone 2 cardio, we're getting enough oxygen that lactate is not accumulating. And that's good. If we want to do something endurance-based, you don't want lactate to accumulate. And that's where a lot of studies have been done around like keeping your lactate down to stay in your aerobic zone for endurance training. But we want lactate to increase if we're doing high intensity exercise, because what that means is we're working hard enough that we're going beyond what our system can. We can't bring in enough oxygen to combat the lactate that's being produced. And so what happens is lactate builds up in our muscle, and that's typical in any type of high intensity exercise. The higher intensity of the exercise, meaning sprints, really heavy, kind of aggressive lifting like CrossFit or something that's going to really push your heart rate up and challenge your muscles at the same time. The problem with that is, as we get older, or maybe even not, just if we don't want to really push ourselves so hard that we're potentially risking injury, or it just takes us a long time to then recover from that workout. So then we need days of recovery after that. With BFR, because we're reducing the oxygen, the lactate accumulates in our muscles faster because the blood is not taking it out of the muscle as fast as it normally would. And so we get a higher amount of lactate in our muscle with BFR training. So what we're doing for testing is testing blood lactate, doing a poke in your ear, which you don't feel hardly at all. It's much less sensitive than your fingertips, so it's a good place to test it. We do it at rest. Then we do a 6-minute workout with BFR, and we test it right after. And then we do the same thing, do it at rest, and then a 6-minute workout without BFR, the exact same workout, and test it after that and see what the differences are. We know that blood lactate, we feel it when we do the workout. We know blood lactate is going to be higher, but it's really interesting to see how much higher. And also it's great feedback for you as the participant to really feel the difference, and knowing when you're doing BFR, if you're getting that right feeling that's stimulating that lactate response. So why do we care? What does lactate do for us? So it does many things. High blood lactate stimulates all of these responses in your body. One, it is good for glucose uptake. When you have more lactate in your blood, your muscles uptake glucose more quickly. So what does this do? One, it helps with our energy and our energy reserves. It helps regulate our metabolic processes and regulate our energy. But it also, in addition, is really good for insulin resistance. As we get older, insulin resistance tends to go up. What does that mean? That means when we eat and we get insulin, which is a normal response to eating, there's nowhere for our body to put the glucose. Glucose typically is stored in our muscles. But if you're not using the glucose that's already in your muscles, then at some point, there's no place to continue to put the glucose from your blood into your muscles, and that spikes insulin. So people, let's talk about people who are unhealthy, maybe don't work out much and are overweight. They have very high, that's what diabetes is. So very high insulin resistance, which means there's nowhere to put glucose. You have too much high insulin, and it's not healthy. So by using more glucose in our muscle as we work out, which lactic acid causes, we have more room to put glucose from our blood. So it maintains our energy, but it also helps to lower insulin resistance. So super healthy as we age. So glucose uptake lowers insulin resistance because we have a place to put glucose. Think of muscles as glucose storage. But if we don't use it, we're not creating more storage. So that's a great response to lactic acid. Another one, and this is great, is fatty acid oxidation, which is a fancy way to just say you burn more fat. It turns on oxidation of your fat cells, which means we can use fat as fuel, and it's burning fat in our body. Not only is it just burning fat, it's burning primarily visceral fat. Why is that important? Visceral fat is the fat around your belly and around your organs, and it is more linked to disease and unhealthy outcomes than just subcutaneous fat. So visceral fat around our midsection is the unhealthy fat that can lead to health issues, and higher blood lactate burns specifically visceral fat. Also, a lot of women, when they go through menopause, I'm sure if it hasn't happened to you, I'm sure you've at least heard it from people like, wow, all of a sudden I have fat in my midsection that I've never had before. Where did this come from? I'm eating the same. I'm doing the same exercise. I'm exercising more. Why do I have now this belly fat? It's because when your estrogen drops, your human growth hormone drops, more visceral fat is stored in your midsection. So by having higher lactate in your workouts, it also leads to more human growth hormone, which I'll get to in a minute. It directly targets visceral fat. That's why there's some people in this program, literally, who did the 3-week, 21-day intro program, which those of you who did that, it's not a super challenging program. The workouts are 15 minutes, lose 1.5 inches in their waist in 3 weeks. And they were not losing that before, even when they tried to do things, right? And I think Alan even experienced that in her first 3 weeks. 1.5 inches reduction in waist, that is directly related to reduction in visceral fat, which is really good for our health. Another thing that increase lactate, it enhances blood flow to your muscles. It releases epinephrine, which is like our fight or flight hormone. It's like what leads to runner's high kind of in your brain, that epinephrine response, but it enhances blood flow to your muscles. Why do we care about that? Better blood flow to muscles. Blood flow brings oxygen to muscles, which brings nutrients, healing. So it reduces pain. It will heal tissue faster. If you've ever had a cut or an injury to your lower leg or your shin area, if you've ever noticed, it takes longer to heal because that part of your body doesn't get as much blood flow. So areas that get more blood flow heal faster. If you get more lactic acid, you're getting better blood flow everywhere. So you'll heal faster and have reduction in pain. Also, this enhancing blood flow to muscle, it increases capillarization in your muscles, which means you actually build more capillaries. More capillaries mean there's more opportunity for blood to get into that muscle because there's actually more little capillaries, which is what our blood runs through to get into the muscle. So it's super healthy. And it also increases capillarization in our brain. So really good for brain health. Blood flow to the brain means more oxygen to the brain, which means better brain health. That combats dementia, Alzheimer's, any of the neural issues we have as we age. A lot of that, some of it's genetic. There's other things that lead to it, but a huge one is oxygenation in the brain. So that's why, making sure you don't have sleep apnea is really important for brain health. But physical activity, super good for brain health. BFR in particular, which increases lactic acid, which increases blood flow, which increases capillarization, all really good for brain health. Another huge one, it stimulates mitochondrial biogenesis. That basically means an increase in the number of mitochondria you have. Mitochondria are our energy cells. They are responsible for the ATP system, which creates phosphate which is an energy source for our muscles. So the more ATP we have, the more quickly our body can go through the ATP cycle and regenerate that energy. The more aerobic capacity we have. So those of you who, I know some people who cycle in this group, and all of a sudden they're like, can kill it on the hills, the same hills they were doing before. And all of a sudden, like, why is this so easy? Part of that's because you have more mitochondria that are allowing you to regenerate energy faster. And so your aerobic capacity increases. Mitochondria is also just like the energy cell of our body. So it increases our energy, our vitality, our recovery, our resistance to stress, just overall energy. Mitochondria is super important to that. Yeah, and aerobic capacity, which I already mentioned. And then the last piece that increased blood lactate leads to is it correlates with a higher release of human growth hormone into our body, into our bloodstream. Okay, why do we care about human growth hormone? So now I'm going to kind of switch into why human growth hormone is so important. So we know blood lactate does all these great things, including leads to an increase in human growth hormone. If you didn't have the higher blood lactate, you would not get that increase in human growth hormone. But if you get the high lactate, you will. Growth hormone, we have a ton of it when we're young, right? I mean, that's what's responsible for us growing, literally growing our muscles, growing our bones, growing as kids. So human growth hormone peaks like in our teenage years, and then it slowly reduces. By the time when we're in our 30s, human growth hormone decreases by 15% every decade. So pretty quick drop in human growth hormone because we're no longer growing. We don't need it as much. However, we do need it because the things it's important for as an adult, it regulates our metabolism. So why does our metabolism drop as we age, and especially as women go through menopause? Partly it's the reduction in human growth hormone. For women in particular, estradiol is directly related to human growth hormone. Women actually have more human growth hormone secretion than men do prior to menopause. But after menopause, quick drop in estradiol, quick drop in human growth hormone, they then have less than men. And that's why there's quicker changes that women see around menopause time, right? So, getting human growth hormone is even more important, or will give you a bigger increase in benefits after menopause, because we're losing that natural supply of human growth hormone more quickly. So we want to find ways to boost it back up. And that's why increasing lactic acid is the best way to do that. And getting increased lactic acid, as we know, BFR is the best way to get that accumulation of lactic acid in our muscles. Let's see. A couple other things human growth hormone does as we age, or as we're adults. It helps our sleep. So do you notice as you get older, we don't sleep as good because growth hormone secretion at night decreases as we age, especially our deep sleep. I have some people in this program that wear an Oura ring, and they've noticed when they have hard BFR days, their deep sleep at night increases. They have a lot longer deep sleep than normal. That's because they're getting more human growth hormone secretion, which helps our sleep cycle. Crazy, all these things. Isn't it so crazy how much all this is connected? Other hugely important things, human growth hormone maintains lean muscle mass and obviously builds lean muscle mass, but it maintains lean muscle mass even without exercise. So here's the guy who kind of discovered BFR, who was from Japan, this was decades ago, he broke his leg and was in a full leg cast. And he did BFR on his leg above where the cast was, right up by his groin. But he couldn't bend his knee. He couldn't move his ankle. So he couldn't work out his leg. His calf did not atrophy in 6 weeks in the cast, which was the first time they'd ever seen that. It's not like he was exercising his calf, but he was getting human growth hormone in his body, which was able to maintain his calf muscle, even though it should have atrophied. So even without exercise, human growth hormone in and of itself will help maintain muscle mass. Now, if we're exercising and doing strength training, it will help increase our muscle mass, which is what most of us want as women, especially post-menopause. We want to increase, but certainly we want to maintain our muscle mass. Also, bone health. It helps to maintain or increase bone health. And as women in particular, we know how important that is post-menopausal. As our hormones change, our bone health can quickly decline, and human growth hormone can directly relate to that. The other ways to increase bone density is very heavy loads or or like impact, like running, jumping, things that are putting an impact on your bones. A lot of people, as we age, it's harder to do that, harder to put that impact because we don't have as much cartilage, or maybe we have old injuries, and harder to hold load as heavy. So with BFR, we get an increase in bone turnover because of the human growth hormone release, and the bone markers in our blood increase, which means our bones turn over more quickly, which is good for bone health. So that comes from the human growth hormone, that comes from the lactic acid, that comes from the BFR. So it's this chain of responses. So maintaining lean mass, maintaining bone health, regulating metabolism, promoting, same as lactate, but promoting lipolysis, which is basically burning fat for fuel, and it limits visceral fat. So it reduces visceral fat, again, super important for long-term health. Increases aerobic capacity, which also means VO2 max, which we probably have, if we do cardio, we've experienced that in the way we feel. And the last thing that is also super cool is increased human growth hormone helps with cognitive function. So an increase in human growth hormone means an improvement or an increase in cognitive function. Obviously something super important as we're aging, and really very hard to get that human growth hormone bump as we age in traditional training methods. So that's why I've been so excited about this method, particularly for women. It's good for everyone, no matter what age, no matter gender, but particularly women going through menopause because of the steeper drop in hormones and the lower amount of estradiol. And as we age, very hard to get human growth hormone in traditional methods. So that's partly why I'm trying to really aim this towards women and get the message out there and reduce the fear of what BFR really is, because there's these huge, as you can see, this whole list we've gone through today, these huge benefits that come from that type of training that's very hard to get otherwise. So what does that mean for you or for us in this program? I mean, basically, you already can feel it. I think most of you can feel when you're doing it. You feel the increased burn, or you feel the increased fatigue. So you're getting these benefits. The burn actually comes from the lactic acid in your muscle. That's what's causing the burn. Some people don't feel as much burn. They feel a fatigue just because that's how their body feels that. But I'd say 90% of the people feel a burn. Some people just feel a deeper fatigue, but that's the same result. But if you want to get tested, and I know not all of you are local, although Carrie had a great idea, we're going to do a Celly Club day at Evolution in October. If anyone, I haven't figured out exactly when yet. We just thought of this yesterday, but I'm like, what a great idea. It's Menopause Awareness Month, even better. And so if anyone wants to coordinate a time to come down, we're going to do some education, we're going to do some testing. We might try to get a mobile DEXA scan unit there, and maybe some guest speakers and stuff. So that would be kind of fun. But so for those of you who aren't local, but if you're local, I'm going to try to do the testing in August, so we can at least get, what I want to do is get enough people so we can show enough statistical relevance of the change and the difference. We kind of already intuitively know it's more, but really showing like how much more. And my theory is it's probably going to be almost like double the amount of lactic acid you'd get from the exact same workout. But if you're using BFR, you're going to double the lactic acid. And I've already tested a couple people, and that's looking like about where it's at. So really, really exciting and very cool to get that super instantaneous, like feedback from your own body, your own biology, your blood at the moment of exercise. So it just, it's irrefutable what's happening when you see it like that, to just go like, wow, it's really working. You see it with the black and white result of your blood test. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to be doing those testing. I'll send an email out about it, but it's going to be, I'm doing one on August 9th and one on August 13th. That's a Tuesday. It's a Friday and a Tuesday. I may do one other date after that. But again, we may do kind of more of an event in October if we have enough interest in that. So yeah, I'll send a follow-up email about that because I do want to get people to sign up. But I'll stop there. I was a lot of science and a lot of talking, but questions, comments, discussion. I see Alan thinking.
I'm thinking. See them wheels turning, right?
Exactly. Mm.
Sally, this is really incredible. It's a lot of information to take in, right? But you know, when you were saying the HGH, human growth hormone, that what I thought I heard you say is that by, BFR, that might be the only way, if not one of the only ways, to actually impact that. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, it is. It is the only way to impact it as much,
right,
to this level. The other ways, there's been studies, and I actually want to do this test also, where like if you do really high intensity exercise or you do low intensity BFR, the response is similar. But what I don't know in these studies is what, like, to me, like the burn I get in BFR, even when I'm doing a hard workout without BFR, I can't get close to that. So to me, if the lactic acid, so I also want to do a test that does a higher or harder workout or heavier workout with a lower BFR and compare. So I'm going to also do that at some point, but I first want to do the apples to apples. And I think 3 tests in one day is going to be too hard to do. So I'll probably come back around and do that as a second cycle later. But yes, I feel like as we age, there's no other way to naturally get a human growth hormone increase to the level that we can with BFR. And I think all of you guys have felt that in the workouts, that like it doesn't compare to a workout without BFR in terms of that feeling of burn. One of the reasons we get so much with BFR, because we're using lightweight, we can continue to do repetitions. Normally, if the weight was heavy, we'd be like, I'm getting a burn. Oh, I got to stop. It's too heavy. Now it's like, I'm getting a burn, but I can keep going. And so it builds more lactic acid.
Yeah. I think, and just another thought that just kind of popped into my mind, and I know that you and I, have conversations, sometimes on the side. So I think I've mentioned this to you too, but it might be interesting for like this kind of research phase. Is what I've been doing is pumping my bands up higher, especially my legs. And what I noticed, like on my Monday workouts that you're leading, is that I'll get to, that fatigue or that real kind of high cardio, like extreme sweat after 25 minutes, that I didn't necessarily have that at the beginning when I was going a little bit more modest with pumping up. So it might be interesting too, at different levels of the pillars constricting, right? and this lactate relationship with.
For sure. I mean, what the bands are doing, they're squeezing the arm or the leg, which is putting pressure on our veins. Our arteries are much deeper, so it's not really impacting the artery very much, especially the type of bands we're using. But it's squeezing the veins, so it's slowing down. The veins are what responsible for taking the lactic acid out of the muscle, because they're going, from the muscle back to the heart, right? So they're slowing down. It's like squeezing a hose, right? And it's like slowing down that flow, so it's not able to pull the lactic acid. Obviously, the tighter you go with that band, the more it's squeezing the veins. So it's gonna slow that down even more. So when you start, I always start people, there's recommended pressures, and you want to start with that recommended pressure that's starting you somewhat conservatively. Because your body, it's a new stress on your body. We want to adapt. Our vascular system will actually get stronger. Our vascular system will get more flexible. And so we want that adaptation to occur. But as you progress, you can continue to add more pressure as long as you're not getting pain, as long as you don't feel like it's really like restricting the muscle. You can kind of feel it sometimes. If I have it too tight, it'll almost feel like it's cramping my muscle. I know that's too tight. Or if you get tingling, like even with movement, if you're still getting tingling, then that's probably slowing it down a little too much, but you will adapt over time. So the same amount of pressure to start with, if you went up higher and it didn't feel good, like a month or two later, that higher pressure may feel fine because your body's continued to adapt to it. So that's a good point. As you guys progress in this program, play with adding a little bit more and kind of seeing where your limit is to it not feeling uncomfortable or not feeling painful, but it's continuing to give you that response. It's like increasing your weights is the traditional way we would do it as we got stronger. This is like increasing the pressure a little bit more is going to continue to challenge the body.
Very cool.
Is that the best? Is that the best way then to sort of move up, increase the pressure on the bands rather than weights? Or how do you know which one to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I tend to lean into, so what we're doing with BFR is we're leaning into our metabolic process to get stronger versus the mechanical process to get stronger. The kind of traditional way of strength training is we focus on mechanical load, which is heavy load that challenges the muscle. But what we're finding is the metabolic response, which is lactic acid, hypoxia in the muscle, getting to our type 2 muscle fibers, creates a faster response. So let's lean into the metabolic a little more first before we go up in weight. So instead of just immediately going, oh, I'm feeling good with BFR, I'll go heavier. That's going back to the mechanical loading, right? So let's go a little bit more with the metabolic to a point. I mean, to the point, like I said, you're not feeling pain. It's not interrupting. It's not really getting in the way of your muscles working. And then when you get to that point and you're like, okay, I don't really feel like comfortable going more pressure, but I still feel like I need more weight, then you could go up in weight. But the increased pressure, man, even with really lightweight, it gets you to fatigue fast. So anyway, you can kind of play with that balance, Nancy, but I would say go with a little more pressure first and see how that feels.
Okay.
And,
okay, good.
And a little more pressure could just be, 25 pounds or, it doesn't have to be a lot. You can just kind of really incrementally go up.
Yeah. Can I ask one more thing?
Yeah.
So the other thing that I'm noticing is that I really quickly am gaining strength in one metric and not the other. So for instance, because I'm coming off like, a year of pretty much longer than that of bed rest. So I suddenly have this like really strong posterior chain, like not a problem. But to do lunges, oh my God, like my quads are. So how do I balance that? And also with upper body, my because I used to row, so my back, upper, working pulling is really strong, but push-ups, no, like weakling.
Okay, that's good. Well, first of all, if you did rowing in the past, then your posterior chain is going to be stronger. And whatever we've done in the past where we were strong, that's easier to rebuild, right? It's like muscle memory. So if you had a strong posterior chain in the past, that's going to get strong faster again. And if your anterior chain wasn't as strong before, it's going to take longer. But just continue to work on it. I mean, I actually emphasize posterior chain a lot in our program because most people are the opposite. Most people are stronger in their anterior chain and weaker in their posterior chain. And posterior chain is so important for posture and back health and just balancing out. So for you, maybe add in, the push-ups, or even if push-ups are too hard for you, do the tubing. I love the tubing because you can moderate the intensity and get that really good burn because you can just keep going. Push-ups, even for me, if I'm kneeling push-ups, at some point I'm just like, oh, I can't do these anymore. Where the tubing, I can kind of keep going and really build that burn. So maybe try some of those. And then lunges in general, just to do a good solid lunge is hard. It does take a lot of quad strength. So maybe build up your squats more, or do not quite as full motion of lunges to start with until you get more strength in those quads. But they will get stronger. If they weren't as strong in the past, they'll just take a little longer to build up with a little more focus.
Okay. And I want them to get deeper. And I think the only way to do that is to just keep as a little incrementally go a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper.
Yeah, exactly. But when you build a muscle at a certain range, it gets stronger beyond that range. So if you can't do a lot of lunges low, I would
Yeah.
prefer doing more at a shorter range and really get that burn and strength. And over time, that will get you stronger in a little bit lower range, So I would go to the range where you can get a lot of reps. I wouldn't try to go low and burn out sooner because, like we talked about, if you go heavy, you're not able to do enough reps to build that lactic
Yeah.
acid. So lighter and getting more reps and really get that burn is going to get more of that human growth hormone response.
Okay, good, great, thank you.
You're welcome. Great questions. Alan, yeah.
Okay, I thought it up. Do you see a point of, or do you think there's a point of diminishing returns with age? Because I'm pretty far past menopause and had not been doing, I mean, limited things, certainly not this whole systematic approach. And I'm wondering if there's a point at which you just can't, get that to generate this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
At a certain limit.
I mean, it's a good question. As we age, typically human growth hormone continues to decline. So it's probably harder to get that. But some of my women in my program in their 70s have had some of the best results, the most dramatic results. And I think that's because they're able to get some human growth hormone that they weren't getting before. And so even if it's not as much as someone younger, it's still more than what you were getting before, which is going to give your body this renewed energy, strength. So I think at any age, and it shows in the research, like at any age, people can get positive results from BFR. And I do think a lot of that comes from the human growth hormone, being able to get more than you otherwise would be able to get, even if it's not as much as you would have gotten, 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I feel like I've kind of proved to myself that it's made a really big impact on me. And I'm 77, so it's not like, I spring chicken here, but awesome. It's really, really improved my all kinds of stuff. A little hard to tell about the brain health and cognitive ability, but the other stuff, the physical stuff for sure.
That's great. Yeah, I read some of this stuff, and a lot of this research is still coming out and they're still figuring out, but like when you correlate the research with what I know people have experienced in this group, it's so clear. It's so clear, right? Like, and it's not like people in this group weren't exercising before but so adding this new type of exercise is just brought on all these new benefits that are very noticeable. So that's what continues to really convince me and motivate me that this is a game changer for people as they age, and women in particular, I think.
Oh, it seems like your testing research could be really, really beneficial to this. And then, getting more and more people tested and spreading the word more.
Yeah.
Should be.
Yeah. And actually, to let you guys know, so we're doing the testing with the existing group in August for the blood lactate, but we're in September, we're rolling out a 6-month study group. And anyone who joins the program, so this would be for new people. So if you guys know anyone, we're doing a special where you sign up for $200. We ship you the bands. You don't have to pay for them. If you complete the 6 months and you complete all the testing and you stay in the coaching for 6 months, we just gift you the bands at the end. So it removes that upfront cost, but it is sort of encouraging the retention and also the participating in the pre and post testing, because we really want to track data through 3 months, 6 months, and we're testing, strength, visceral fat, some heart rate, like blood pressure, heart rate stuff, and just also motivation to exercise, frequency, because we believe that motivation goes up as people feel these results. So really excited about that one too. So the blood lactate is like an instantaneous, comparing apples to apples. And this is more like, okay, you started here and what's your progression? So we're going to really do a push for that in September to get new women signed up. So if you have any friends that you've been thinking about inviting, it's great because it's for women's health, and it's going to collect some great data. And then we're also giving this kind of lower startup cost that helps people get started a little easier. So.
Do you have a flyer on that or something that I could share?
Not yet, but I will in the next week or so. I'll be starting to put some messaging out and sending emails. So I'll send you guys some emails that you can forward to friends. That'd be great.
That's great.
Yeah. Cool.
Do you have time for another question, or are we out of time?
Yeah. No, it's only, yeah, I have time.
Okay, so is there a way, but I guess the first question is there a way to measure human growth hormone? Like if it's increasing or if it's decreasing. I know that there's like a lot of, doctors that are specializing in hormone replacement and balance and stuff like that. Or is it this blood lactate measurement? Then you would be able to link assumptions to it, or maybe
That's a good question. I've seen studies where they directly measure human growth hormone, so there's got to be a way. I need to look into how difficult that is to do.
Because that would be
blood lactate's pretty easy. I don't know if human growth hormone. I'm going to look that up. How to test.
Cool.
Yeah, because that would be cool to see the direct relationship of that.
And I don't know about everybody else, but I'm subtly becoming obsessed with my human growth hormone. Just want to really ramp that up. And then the other thing I wrote down when it's just super interesting about my obsession with human growth hormone is that, right? Like makes so much sense that it's just rampant when you're a kid and then it peaks out when you're a teenager. And then you said by 30s with most people, it starts to, you said what, decrease about 15% every decade?
Yeah.
So in theory, BFR would be really beneficial for people, especially women in their 30s, right? Like just to kind of start to balance it or whatever.
Yeah. The guy that I learned from when I originally heard the talk, he talked a lot about people like 30s is a good age to start.
Got it.
And so that is something because of the hormone changes in menopause and the steep drop, that's a particularly super helpful time, but it's not to say that starting ahead of that wouldn't be great. And, maybe over time I need to message that more, but I've been trying to stay focused on kind of the populations I'm working with, but there's no reason why someone couldn't start it earlier and just have a head start on all this and be helping with that. Yeah.
Yeah. It'd be cool for that 6-month survey or that testing zone to have different genders and different
age groups. And
yeah,
that's a good point. Great idea.
Then it just kind of popped into my mind, like people that are transitioning, like gender fluidity and stuff, and they go on to a lot of different, hormone, medications and balancing and stuff.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Really.
That's a demographic that I think could be interesting.
Yeah. I mean,
right? Like male transition, female.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know enough about what's happening with their hormones, but that would be kind of crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
good. It's a good point about the diversity of the testing. So yeah, if you guys have friends that are male or younger women, I'm not limiting it to a certain age. It would be interesting to get diversity in that testing.
How about if somebody lived for the testing? My daughter lives in San Francisco and she might be interested, but that's a long haul to evolution.
To do the lactate testing, you mean?
Yeah.
Or the 6-month program, the lactate testing? Yeah, I mean, it's up to her. If well, the 6-month program is all virtual, just like what you guys do, right? It's all virtual. And the testing is all for that. The testing is all self-reported. They do it on their own. It's like push-ups and measurements and things like that. The blood lactate, they have to come to Evolution because it's like a machine. I mean, it's not, but people aren't going to buy their own machine. So I have the machine to come down and do the blood testing at Evolution. But the other study, people do that on their own.
Okay. Oh, that's great. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Love it. Great conversation. Great questions. Awesome crew on here today.
You're getting real smart, Sally, with this topic. I'm very impressed with this information today.
I had to study up. I had to study up on all this stuff. Like really good for me to learn more. It's very exciting. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. For those of us who are doing it, I mean, this better than anybody. It's just so completely different in the results that you get. It's so fast, and you feel it right from the beginning. And it's just, you know, I feel like this crazy proselytizer now. Whenever I talk to somebody, they're like, how are you? And I'm like, I am amazing. Like, let me tell you my whole story.
I think that is common though, Carrie.
Yes.
I think it really is, because at first you're just like, you can't even really find the words, because it is so scientific that you can't really talk about it. You're just like kind of babbling with all your friends. Actually, the best thing about this, I got to tell you guys, but it was almost a year ago when Sully and a group of us girls, we were in the Castro at an Italian restaurant, and there was about 8 of us sitting at this big round table, and it was happening to Sully. She did the same thing. She was talking about it, and she was like, I've just never been so excited about anything, and I'm not really sure how to explain it, but this is BFR, blood flow restriction. None of us could remember what it was. But we were all like, okay, we're just going to sign up.
I have no idea what you said.
So then the next thing you knew, there was 8 of us signed up, and I think everybody's still doing it. And it started off, right, Sally? You had like 13, and now you've got 200.
Wow.
I mean, but it was the same thing. She couldn't really talk about the facts, but we were all like, okay, I'm in.
And Cheryl, that's the appropriate response. I'm like, it should just infect people, but you know, you really do. I feel that I really have to learn more about the way that it works, so that I can be more effective when I'm talking about it. Because I'm not a world-class athlete like Ashley. I'm just this person who it's changed my life, you know.
It's true. It's so true. It's so exciting. I love the newcomers, because you're just like blown away, you know. We all did. Like the first 3 or 4 weeks, we were all like, what is going on here? You know?
Yep.
And it keeps going. So it's definitely progressive.
Yes.
Right?
Awesome.
Yeah. How long have you been doing it now, Nancy? Like 3 months, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's about 3 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, and I don't know, this human growth factor, it seems, for me, I really think it makes me feel younger overall. Right? Don't you just something really gets revitalized at a really deep level. It's flipping.
Yeah, I do feel like that's the mitochondria. Because that affects our energy, that affects, you know, our ability, our capacity, that affects our, you know, it really affects us from a cellular level, the energy and endurance, strength, all those things. So I agree. And you know, when the guy that talked about it when I first learned about it, super smart guy, comes off a little salesy, kind of like, hey, he's very like, so, but he would always say like, I feel 15 years, 20 years younger, but I always hesitate to say that because it sounds a little like, you know, like too good to be true or gimmicky or but it is true. Like I have not felt this good in 15 or 20 years for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's I got to figure out how to work that in without it sounding too
bro,
too cheesy.
Too midlife crisis, bro. I didn't have to buy a Porsche. I just bought some bands.
That's right.
Skip the Porsche.
Skip the Porsche. That's a good tagline.
Yeah, just skip the Porsche, and just run everywhere with your bands on. See, there's all these taglines that are coming up, Sally.
I love it. I know. So good. I got to write that down.
The core marketing group here.
Yeah. Right? I love it.
Oh, this is it.
Awesome.
Hey, I have to
leave. Alan.
I have to leave. This has been fabulous. This is another one of these great ones, but somehow this one's even more inspiring because it's kind of like,
I agree,
aimed at me. So thank you.
It's good. Much. Well, I'm glad. I appreciate you guys showing up for the science today, and I'm glad it was.
Love the science.